Hello everyone, my name is Shannon. I am a naturalist up at the Woodlands Nature Station, and I'm very excited to be here today to talk with you guys about basically everything about eagles. We're going to cover a really wide variety of topics. As we go through, I'll kind of glance around. If anyone has any questions, feel free to raise your hand. I'll see if I can answer that. Sometimes I might say, wait a slide or two, and we'll get to that in a moment. Now, my first slide is just kind of explaining who I am, but I think Pam did an excellent job right there, so I don't have too much more to add. Now, at the Woodlands Nature Station, we do have over 50 species of rescued native wildlife, including a bald eagle. That picture right there is our resident eagle, Daha. Her full name is Daha Hode. She was actually rescued right on the border between us and Canada there. She had been found on a Mohawk reservation. Unfortunately, she suffered a gunshot wound to her wing. So her name, Daha Hode, is actually a name she was given by her rescuer. It's a Mohawk word that means leader. So if you are unsuccessful in finding eagles in the wild, which I don't think you will be, we're going to give you lots of tips and tricks, figure out how to find them. But if you just can't, you can always stop by the Woodlands Nature Station, take a look at Daha there. Okay, so first of all, we'll kind of cover the basics. What is a bald eagle? It is one of the largest raptors, birds of prey, birds that hunt and catch other animals for food, that we have here in Kentucky. So about a 7-foot wingspan, which for perspective, I've got about a 5-foot wingspan. They're pretty big, very big. Their weight is quite variable. They can be 7 to 14 pounds. Now, any guesses, who is larger, the males or the females? Females. It sounds like you guys have already come with a good amount of eagle knowledge. The females are larger. There really isn't much in the way of sexual dimorphism between the males and the females. Physically, they look identical, but the girls are just a little bit larger typically. Now, eagles, if you want to find them, think about what they eat. About 75% of their diet is fish. So usually if you can get near water, you have a pretty good shot at seeing them. They have that beautiful white head and tail there, but they only gain that when they are 5 years old, when they're fully mature. Now, when you are looking up at the sky, there are other big birds that you're going to see. These are the 3 largest birds found here in Land Between the Lakes. Now, I'm pretty sure no one is going to mistake an American white pelican for an eagle. Huge wingspan, 8 to 9 feet, big birds, bright white. You can definitely recognize them. But I often get a lot of questions about the golden eagle right here. A little bit larger than the bald eagle, but pretty similar in overall appearance right there. So let's take a closer look at these guys. Now right here we have 2 pictures, an adult golden eagle and an adult bald eagle. Now from right here, they're very, very easy to tell apart. That white head and tail, that really stands out. With the golden eagle, you're also going to notice some kind of golden feathers around the nape of the neck, but depending on your lighting, you might not really see that. You never get perfect images of something when you're looking for it in the wild, so sometimes it can be a little bit harder to tell. Another thing to look at is their feet. So the golden eagle typically hunts on land, things like rabbits. Their feathers actually go all the way down to their toes. So they have fully feathered legs. The bald eagle, because they are hunting about 75% fish, they actually have bare ankles. So think about it, if you're swooping down after a fish, reach your legs into the water, you don't necessarily want to get your feathers all wet. So they just have bare ankles right there to better allow them to hunt for fish. So this, really easy. We can tell these guys apart. Gets a little bit more complicated. Any guesses which side is the bald eagle and which side is the golden eagle? These are both juvenile birds. Okay, I'm hearing right side, bald eagle. You guys are correct. Like I said, it sounds like you came here with a good amount of eagle knowledge. This is our juvenile bald eagle. Looks very different than mom and dad did. Completely dark head, completely dark feathers here, not even a hint of white on the tail. Now, there are a few differences you might see right away, kind of lighter golden on the golden eagle here. We have this band of white on their tail. So, pretty easy to tell apart, but again, if the lighting isn't great, you might just see a big, dark eagle shape. Now, in general, the golden eagle's head looks smaller compared to their body than with the bald eagle. They just seem to have a much kind of chunkier head in proportion to their overall shape. But again, that really depends on the view you've gotten. Now, if you are here in Land Between the Lakes, I recently read a report about golden eagle sightings in Kentucky. Land Between the Lakes and Bernheim Forest were referred to as hot spots in that article. And hot spots for Kentucky meant that in their wintertime at Land Between the Lakes and Bernheim, you could expect to see maybe 2 golden eagles in the entire area. We have a lot of wintering bald eagles here. In severe winters, the numbers can be about 200 individuals. So if you see an eagle, chances are it is a bald eagle. But if you do think it's a golden, get some extra looks and see what you can see.
Do they hang out together?
Do they hang out together? Not so much. They have different food sources, kind of different habitat requirements. The bald eagles want to be near the water, so they're more likely to be found near the lake shore. Golden eagles are more likely to hunt in open fields, edges of forests. So it's not impossible that they might be nearby. And one thing to keep in mind with eagles is they'll never say no to fast food, easy food, carrion, roadkill. I see eagles almost every time when I drive home. I'm not terribly far from the lake, but they're not there to get fish. They're there right by the side of the highway waiting for roadkill. So they do feed on other things as well, and I would imagine that that might be an area where bald and golden eagles might meet. Okay, so kind of continue. Who on this picture is a bald eagle? Got a number of different birds. I've got one here, here, here. Some of them are easy. Bald eagle, bald eagle. But it is a little bit of a trick question. These are all bald eagles. All bald eagles. There is variety in how they look as juveniles. The next slide really shows that off. So they don't just go from being an all dark individual, like this guy right here, probably a year old, and then of course the adult, 5+. These guys are probably 2 years old, maybe veering into 3. This one is definitely 3 to 4 years old, so almost there, but not quite. So there's some variety, and if you do see a juvenile and you have the right lighting, you can make a guess as to how old they are. Okay, another thing you will see here in Land Between the Lakes when you're looking for eagles is eagle nests. We get a lot of questions about what is and isn't an eagle nest, but a really good rule of thumb is to keep in mind that a first-year bald eagle nest is about 5 feet across. They're really, really big, and they might be around 3 feet deep. And then every single year, if that was a good nest, a successful nest that they're able to raise young in, the eagles will come back to it. And in the wild, they might live up to 30 years or so. So that's a lot of years of building nests. They don't clean their nest out every year. So that nest is going to have old broken eggshells, bits of scales, fish skeletons. When they come back to it in the springtime, they're going to build an entirely new platform on top of the old platform. So those nests will get bigger and bigger. So this picture right here is the largest eagle nest on record. It was in St. Petersburg, Florida. Very, very big, 2 tons in weight. It eventually broke the tree it was in. They probably would have kept using it, but 2 tons of weight just got to be a little bit too much to be supported on that tree. So yeah, eagle nests will be really, really big. Okay, so now we're going to kind of get into why we have eagles here at Lamutula Lakes, and that is a combination of factors. One of which is we have really good habitat for it. We've got about 300 miles of undeveloped shoreline. So for an animal that wants to nest in a big tree and catch a lot of fish, that's an ideal location. And then we also have reintroduction. So there's been a lot of reintroduction efforts with regards to eagles. And to get into that, we're going to kind of follow a timeline of eagle history. So we're going to start way back, 1789. That was the year that they actually used the eagle on the Great Seal of the United States. So that symbol of the United States had that big eagle on there. They picked that in 1789. And there was an estimated 25 to 75,000 pairs in the lower 48 states. So a pretty good population right there. Then we jump forward a little bit. In 1939, they discovered that DDT was effective as a pesticide. So they started using it for a variety of things, for crops, also to reduce malaria. And then 1949, the last bald eagle nest in Kentucky for a number of years. So it's very rarely a single factor that causes a species to decline. For the bald eagles, it was definitely a combination of habitat loss, of hunting, and then as their numbers got lower, they introduced DDT. So in 1959, DDT was used at 80 million pounds per year in the United States. So that's a lot of chemicals. In 1961, we had the last successful eagle nest in Tennessee. That was actually just south of us near the Reelfoot Lake area. So it was still in our region, but the last one in Tennessee for a number of years. 1962, Rachel Carson published Silent Spring, where she kind of brought people's attention to the fact that a lot of bird populations were declining. And she linked that to pesticide use like DDT. And then 1 year after that, in 1963, there was only 487 pairs of bald eagles in the entire lower 48 states. So that's not a lot. Now you note that I keep mentioning the lower 48 states. Alaska was never really included in that count because there's such a much smaller human population, so they never made the same impact on the eagle population there as they did around here in Kentucky and all the rest of the lower 48. Now, this is a fun little clip that shows someone basically demonstrating how safe they consider DDT. So we're going to take a quick look at this. I heard someone say children playing in it. That will happen, but I don't know if you're going to expect what's going to happen here. I think that's a bowl of like cereal or porridge or something.
So he's gone.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. See?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, bit of a different time there. I think a lot of the opinion was if something didn't immediately impact a human, they thought it was safe. It immediately killed things like mosquitoes, which was very beneficial because malaria was still a big issue in the South and all around the world, but they didn't see any effects on people. Now, DDT is something that really goes up the food chain through bioaccumulation. Basically, all of the little organisms will have a small amount of DDT in them. The bigger organisms have to eat more of the little organisms in order to survive, and then eventually you just get a little bit more of DDT, a little bit more of DDT. It's something that gets stored in the fat in the body, and then now you have a large amount of it in there, and you don't know what it's going to do. With birds of prey that ate fish, things like eagle osprey right here, what happened is when they would lay their eggs, they would lay eggs with very, very thin shells. So that population was already declining due to loss of habitat and hunting, and now they weren't able to replace their numbers. When either mom or dad eagle went to sit on the nest, they would accidentally crush those eggs. Enough times with no baby eagles, you're not going to have any eagles at all, which is why we had that period of 40 years in Kentucky and 30 years in Tennessee with no bald eagles. Now, as far as the human impact, that's one that's a little bit harder to measure, but some studies have linked a higher correlation of things like cancer, lower fertility. One interesting one is they actually found that women that were exposed to DDT in their preteen years were 5 times more likely to develop breast cancer. So it did have an impact on people, but it was one of those things so far down the line that people just didn't realize it. Okay. Now, with Silent Spring, a lot of conservation efforts, people started to rethink that video that we just saw right there. And in 1972, DDT was banned in the United States. And then in 1978, eagles were fully protected in the lower 48 under the Endangered Species Act. So at that point, we have no eagles, we want to protect them, but you really can't build a population from nothing. So that is where eagle hacking began. And we started eagle hacking in 1980 in Land Between the Lakes. So probably the next question is, what does it mean to hack an eagle? So when we think of hacking, we think of computers, nothing like that. With eagle hacking, they actually raised baby bald eagles in towers on the south end, the Tennessee side of Land Between the Lakes. Now, eagles are a bird that can become imprinted. Has anyone here ever heard of that, imprinting? Essentially, some species aren't born knowing what they are. They learn who they are, who they should look for in a future mate by looking at their parents. So if you think of a duckling or a chicken following along behind whoever's raised it, they think that's mom. They think they are that human. That's imprinting. So if you're trying to rebuild a wild population, you don't want a whole bunch of bald eagles that think they're people. They're not really going to be successful at being wild eagles and mating and creating a new generation. So they wanted to keep them isolated from humans, but they're also raising baby bald eagles. They need to provide them with some care. So what they did is they built 2 towers like this. This is one tower, the tower that will have the baby bald eagles. There is an eagle in this box right here. Now, those eagles were obtained through a variety of places, Alaska, Minnesota, Patuxent Wildlife Research Center, where they were raising eagles. And with the wild nests, eagles typically have 3 eggs, but normally only 2 eagles survive. So they took the youngest eaglet from those wild nests, not impacting the wild numbers, and brought them to a tower. Now, the second tower right next door would have a pulley system. So they'd put food in the pulley, send it over to the baby eagles. Food would appear from the sky. The baby eagles only saw each other, so they grew up still understanding that they were bald eagles. So this is a fun picture right here. You can see one of those baby eagles in the box. Not too much visible, but definitely those big impressive talons right there. Now, started in 1980. In 1984, we did have a hacked eagle nest in the Tennessee portion of Land Between the Lakes. And then in 1989, we finally had eagles in the Kentucky side of Land Between the Lakes. And at this point, we're going to kind of pull out of the timeline for a minute and just take a spotlight at one individual eagle that was hacked. So Eagle 629-11051, that was the name of his band. They did not have names for these birds, so unfortunately that's what we know him by. But he was a pretty impressive bird. He actually came from the Columbus Zoo. So the Columbus Zoo had a pair of injured bald eagles that laid eggs. And so they took him from the Columbus Zoo, brought him to Kentucky, and he was hacked in 1981. And then in 1984, he became the first bird in the Southeast to nest. So the first hacked bird in the Southeast in 1984. Now you might be doing the math and wondering, that's not 5 years old. That's not a mature bald eagle. He was also the first record of a 3-year-old bird successfully nesting. And he was the first recorded bald eagle that had been hatched in captivity as nesting successfully in the wild. So all in all, this was a pretty impressive bird. Now this is, oh, wrong way. This right here is not that individual, but I actually do have a newspaper clipping that has a photo of him. Unfortunately, it's not the greatest quality. It's very blurry, so I just use a generic 3-year-old eagle right here. But after the program, we are going to be setting up a little table just outside with some various props, some old newspaper clips. And so if you guys want to take a look at that, I definitely encourage you to do so. It's been a lot of fun to dig through some of our old records. Now, it doesn't really end with Eagle 629-11051. His son was also very impressive. So his son nested at Mammoth Furnace, Kentucky in 1990. This was the second eagle nest in Kentucky. This was also the second known nest of a 3-year-old bird. So he was also starting nesting at 3-year-old, just like his father had. And then this picture right here kind of shows you a little bit of how they had to monitor those eagle nests. For the most part, they kept their distance. It's recommended that you keep about a 1/4 mile distance from an active eagle nest so as not to disturb them. We don't want to scare them away from the area, make them leave the nest for whatever reason. But there does come a point when they wanted to band them. So what they would do is they would send someone up a tree. He would climb up there, band those baby eaglets, and then descend the tree, which I cannot imagine. That had to be a pretty harrowing thing to do right there. So eagles are doing pretty well, especially this particular family. Take a look at what happened with our numbers. Now, between 1980 and 1989, 44 eaglets were hacked into Land Between the Lakes. And they started nesting here, starts going up and up. You can definitely see a really significant incline. Now, what did that mean for the rest of Kentucky? So 86 to 94, this shows the density of nesting eagles, and they're pretty much all centered right around Land Between the Lakes. Kind of stays the same for quite a while, but eventually territory starts to get a little tighter. Eaglets typically return to within about 100 miles of where they learn to fly in order to build their own nests. But they are territorial. So if a territory is occupied, they have to move a little bit further and further away. So what we see as the years goes on and those population numbers build up, they start to spread out through the rest of Kentucky as well. And also to other states. In 1991, an eagle that was hacked in LBL nested in Indiana. That was the first successful nest in Indiana since 1898. So that was a pretty impressive one right there. And then skipping through a few more years, the numbers just kept going up to the point where in 2007, the bald eagle was delisted from the Endangered Species Act. At that point, there were about 10,000 pairs in the lower 48 states. Their goal around that time was to have at least, I believe it was like 1,500 nesting pairs in the southeast. They had about 4,000 at the point when they delisted, just in the southeast. So this was a very, very successful program. Okay, so now that we know that we have the habitat, reintroduction has brought them back, we have a lot of eagles in the area. How do we find them? So first we have to know what to look for. With the adults, it's usually very easy. Bright white head, you just kind of scan the tree line. I always recommend to people kind of get to an area near the water, take a look at the shoreline about 2/3 the way up a tree. If you see a round object, get your binoculars, look a little more closely. If you see that white head, you very likely have an adult bald eagle. If you see this kind of brown mass, maybe it could be an adult bald eagle, but I mean an immature bald eagle, but it also could be a squirrel nest. When you start looking for bald eagles, you're going to realize how many squirrel nests we have around here. They're all over the place. Normally, it's pretty easy to see they're not quite the right shape, but after a snow event like we just had, every squirrel nest has a little cap of white on top of it, and it gets really hard to find the bald eagles. Another thing to look for is going to be the nests. So really large structures, sometimes kind of vaguely triangular shaped right there. You're going to have some eagle nests. We do have an eagle nest in roughly every bay of Land Between the Lakes. So there's a lot of nests to find. You also may see them in flight. Now usually people's first image of an eagle is in flight. Most of the time they're sitting in a tree. But if you do catch them in flight, there's a couple things to look for. That really straight wing, they kind of fly like they're flying 2x4. Even as they flap their wings, it looks really stiff. The other bird that you might see soaring around here is going to be a vulture. But the vultures kind of help us out. They hold their wings in dihedral, V for vulture.
Does the golden eagle have a straight?
The golden eagle is straighter than the vulture, but they hold their wings slightly uplifted. Again, it's one of those things that's so minimally different that unless you get a great look, it can be hard to tell, but they're a little bit more up, not like as a full V like the vulture, but a little bit lifted. It's not quite as straight. Okay, recommendations, definitely taking binoculars with you. Eagles are a bit skittish. If you get up close, they're probably going to fly away. So having binoculars will just allow you to get a better look. It also makes it easier for you to respect the wildlife and maintain that 1/4 mile from any nests, especially active nests. Now, that might lead to the question of when are the nests active? Pretty much now. So they're going to be breeding and laying eggs beginning in February around here. Always recommend dress very warm. You're going to the lake shore to find those bald eagles. It's always way colder at the lake than it is everywhere else. And kind of knowing where to look. If it is a nice day, they might be right up on the edge of the lake. If you start to see a lot of white caps on the water, it's really windy and cold, they're going to be further back in the bays and kind of nestle a little bit more down into the trees. Okay, so here are some hot spots, but I do want to preface this with saying if you get somewhere in Land Between the Lakes, you have a shot at seeing bald eagles. On my commute to work, I see eagles probably every other day just driving up the trace. So anywhere in LBL is a good opportunity for seeing a bald eagle. But some places that we do recommend, the dams, Kentucky and Barkley, that isn't a great area for birding. Basically, the fish kind of tumble through the dam and they're easy pickings. So if you want to see eagles and gulls and pelicans, you're going to see a lot of them up at the dams right here. Another area that's really good is Pisgah Bay and Smith Bay. These ones, there's actually a paved road that leads out to them, so it's fairly easy to get to. For the Birmingham Ferry side of Pisgah. The other side, it is a gravel road, so a little bit more difficult. The Nature Watch area is another great location. Honker Lake, Empire, There's a number of different eagles there, as well as a few eagle nests. Energy Lake has been a better and better spot to see eagles lately. I also see a lot of pelicans there, so it can be a fun birding location. And then at the bridge, a lot of the time, the eagles I see driving in is right here at the Ender's Ferry Bridge, usually just off to the side watching the cars come in. Now on the south end, there are also a few locations. Red Hollow, the campground over here, you can get some good sights. Ginger Bay, Boswell Landing, Gray's Landing, and then I strongly recommend Fort Donaldson National Battlefield. If you take the drive-through tour right there, you come to an area where there's a big parking lot right by the river. There's a pair of bald eagles that keep nesting right there. And we tell people stay a quarter of a mile away, but when an eagle builds a nest right next to a parking lot, they knew what they were getting into. So it's definitely, don't harass the birds, but that's a human space they chose to be near. So you can get some really good looks at those eagles as well. Okay, and then right here, we're going to end by testing your sight. Now, I mentioned at one point the eagles were territorial, and they are during the breeding season, but in the wintertime, they're just kind of hanging out waiting for spring. They don't mind collecting in larger groups. So there is a group of eagles up here. See if you guys can spot all of them. I've heard 7, I've heard 6. Let's see. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So there are 8 bald eagles in that one shot right there. Yeah, as you can see, it's really those juvenile eagles that can be hard to spot, blend into those trees a bit better. Okay, and at this point, that is my full PowerPoint. So right now, if you guys have any questions, I would be happy to answer them. Yes?
Now, you said they were delisted on the endangered species list, but are they still on the protected list?
So they were delisted. They're no longer protected under the Endangered Species Act. But there is another bit of legislation, the Bald and Golden Eagle Protection Act. That one was actually signed in 1940, and then they later on added the Golden Eagle as well. And that functions a lot like the Migratory Bird Act. You're not allowed to harass the birds, to own their feathers, body parts, so it protects them as well. So they're protected under the Bald and Golden Eagle Protection Act at this point in time.